Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to tonight's talk. Tonight's talk is rather a playful episode, and I'm continuing certain things I gave the preview in the talk before. When subjects become your subjects, a very crucial moment in the history of man, where the human being wonders about the control and conscious free will over subjective phenomenology. It's as if we have many experts on what is real to us, but we have less experts on what is unreal. Because what is real to people is different, and how they awaken to the unreal is different as well. You may be a human being that the way knowledge has been spoon fed to you, sculpted behind your eyes, is one where the unknown may be accepted in certain ways. If you're a religious person raised in a religious context, the unknown is the will of God. If you are not raised in a religious context, you're raised in a secular context, the unknown is the laws of the cosmos, the vastness of it. If you have more, okay, sorry about that, guys. To continue, there's some people who have um, a religious mindset, a secular mindset. We went over that. There's also, you can say, the in betweens. We have the agnostic and we have the spiritualist. We have many kinds of human beings who entertain various containers for the meaning of the world, really. To really experience one's subtler planes, the realm of abstraction, what this imagination of the lifetime is, I find that there has to come responsibility as a creature of attention rather than a creature of conditional manifest existence. Ah, what can I say? When one wants to navigate their subjective realms, they use what they have access to. Just like how we have a biological body, and how, like, in an instant you can move your hand, or you can pick up an object, or you could do whatever instantly. It's as if like so second nature. If you were to grab a cup of cup from the cupboard, it would be like instantaneous. There's no doubt you didn't plan for years to grab that cup. It was instantaneously possible. Similarly, the subjective realm is similar. Excuse me, in the sense that just like how there is a certainty of instantaneous objective consequence, there comes a certainty of instantaneous subjective consequence. Really, it's as if like we're given a body to realize we have a mind. The moment we realize we're given a mind, we realize greater ways that bodies are present in the conscious being. Now, one has to look at abstraction very clearly in the sense that they see, how can I say it? For example, a person who gets angry, I find that there are many layers. It's as if they are entertaining many subjective realms. It's as if usually when an emotion comes, it's like a bunch of thoughts overlapping. Sometimes it's the vague continuity of a past emotion, as if in your past you did something but it was unfulfilled, and so in the future you're never going to get a chance to do it because that moment is gone, but the memory exists, and as you remember that memory from a different moment, the whole memory tries to redeem itself. So what that means is I often say in these talks that ideas are trying to survive and continue, but the way they continue is in the eyes of man. And anything that has come in the attention of the human being has found itself to be eternalized, more at least. I find that once psychology has to confront certain dimensions and certain frameworks of how subjectivity is kept, how meaning is kept. And I, per se, simplify this to four dimensions. I find any human being who understands these four simple dimensions, at least the way I'm explaining it here, you can navigate your subjective realms easy. It's all about confrontation and realizing that the mind doesn't move. It's like when the body moves, okay, you can remain as the same thought, but when the mind moves, it shifts the world of all thoughts. What I meant by navigating abstraction in the subtitle is that you as a human being are simultaneously in a room where it's purely objective and in a room where there is a subjective lens over the objectivity. So what does that mean? That means I caught onto this with this subtlety, and it took me, actually it didn't take me a while, but it was a grand discovery when I realized my mind is in multiple rooms, my body is in one room. Okay, one room of dimensional manifestation. Now, when I say the mind is in multiple rooms, let's just consider the mind as another room. So you see, if I tell you to imagine something, if I tell you right now in your room, see an object, now like copy paste that object in your imagination and imagine that object hovering in the air, or like that object, instead of being on the table, imagine it being on the ceiling if you're indoors. So you see in your imagination that cup, that same cup, you see the duplicate version of it that is on the ceiling. That cup doesn't fall. And you see that, but another person may come and be like, "Hey man, what are you looking at?" And to them, you may be just looking at an empty ceiling. But to yourself, you are in a room where the subjective content is apparent. So imagination is like a lens over consciousness, rendering consciousness a new self. So what that means is our body is like the imagination of the physical world, and our ego is, um, you can say, the imagination of the subjective realm. But that's going too far. The imagination of your imagination. Yeah. Sorry, guys. I'm a bit nasally. I gotta clear my throat during this. So please excuse the pauses. However, this is a very important episode, guys. It's the point where the civilization and the species is realizing how to move as a mind that is projecting a body rather than a body projecting a howling a brain around that's projecting a mind. So you see, when you declare objectivity to be the cause and consciousness to be the effect of objectivity, consciousness is limited to a certain way it's kept. But when you study consciousness and its source from the unknown dimensions of one's intelligence, from the unknown skies, the unknown inner skies, behind your eyes, you navigate as the presence of an observer that is ultimately at its core attributeless. As the body, you navigate as a creature that has solidified a sort of value system. What that means is the world is filled with attributes. Attributes you got to respect, you got to consider. You know, it's like an inventor that once has found the inventor's vision, the significance of all resources. You see, there's something incredible in life where I call it is finding the genius in the moment. And it took me a while to kind of notice it. I don't know how. Sometimes I feel certain views I have on the world were kind of miracles of my own nature. So what I mean is that there are certain lessons that you will simply, like, there's external, like, you find many people where in which the logo speaks through them to you in your lifetime. But there is a moment that will come where you will see you're all alone, and you are the pure presence of attention unconditionally in the cosmic sector, in the universal sector. When you realize that, you will laugh. You will become the elder of your own moment. You will free fear. Fear will become fear, and chaos will become like your grandkids running and playing in the yard. Do you know? It becomes life is very fascinating, guys. It's behind your eyes you can experience many elevations. If the plane of existence behind your eyes can be navigated in many ways, emotions are testament to this. And I think there's no greater emotion than being able to accept your moment of being regardless of condition. There's something strange about simply accepting your moment that makes the complexity vanish, as if the armies of complexity attacked. And the simple guy was like, whoa, I'm too simple for this. And the army couldn't attack anymore. It's like, okay, how can we attack such simplicity? It's the same with, I find, like magic shows, actual like illusionists, that they navigate in the shadows of the simple, but making the act seem complex. Often that dazzling girl is the distraction, you know. And so there are many distractions in life, but these distractions are all the will of the eyes within. In my mind, behind my eyes, I have lived many lives, but in front of it, I'm just going through one, barely surviving here, guys. And I always wondered, because let me tell you why I constantly speak about piloting one's attention and piloting the inner realms and the pilots of consciousness. Because, guys, that is going to be the most significant archetype. You see, if we consider that there's an inner realm, and we consider a realm has an endless sky, you know, the world has no edge. So behind your eyes, it's actually various infinite projections. You can feel the echo. You can hear the echo of your own thoughts off. Sometimes it's like I had a certain emotion in the past. I wanted to say something. I couldn't. That became like a reserved kind of slingshot. And like, I remember one day giving a talk, I suddenly, like, the emotion was released. You know, I thought of life to be a riddle, a sort of puzzle. And this sort of puzzle, it came to me through mysticism. Really, my fascination about mysticism was that it was keeping a door open that many ideologies don't. That really, at some point, the known experiencer will feel like an unknown experiencer. And if it cannot confront the unconditional quality of that moment, then the conditions will, in some sense, have already devoured the being, as if, like, um, you're too convinced by what you see to wonder if there's anything else to see. Something like that. Pretty much, I think it comes down to moments where your personality dictates how you are present in the moment, and moments where your experiential presence dictates the ideology. I tend to navigate, usually, if you notice when I give these talks, it's as if there is a strange valve of experience open, regardless of the conditions of the thought. And the only thing I've noticed is that just like how everything you as a person have ever said, you have also heard it. There is nothing that a person can say without hearing it. This is why any expression one does in this universal sector, it will echo 10 times heavier behind your eyes because you said it, you did it, because it became you. You know, I was thinking, I'm going to get back to this pilot thing I was saying. I was thinking literally in a couple hundred years where our species has become more interstellar, I just saw this vision that one day there's going to be people coming and asking other human beings if they want to be galactic pilots, interstellar pilots. Right now, our aircraft is good to search our own skies, but there will come a time perhaps where we will treat the whole galactic sector as our sky, our simple sky that we can fly in. In 2013, I had a dream of a highway of stars. And what I mean, I even wrote a book on it. But really, what it was that I saw literally at night, you know how you see stars at night? I just saw a line of stars moving. And really, it became apparent to me that civilizations can get advanced. So imagine that moment that me and everybody who's listening here are, for example, walking and suddenly we see like very important people coming out and saying, "We need pilots, God damn it." Excuse me. The human being cannot just be piloted, but can pilot reality. That's what your mind is actually for. The mind is not something that moves through locations. The mind actually generates the location, especially when you wonder about your subjective realm. So in other words, in front of your eyes you are in a world, behind your eyes you are the world. So the navigation of the attention cannot just be possessed by the identity and ideology of a human being. So really behind your eyes experience can navigate in ways where it's like it's not even dualistic for there to be the story of humankind. You become an evolutionary animal who can never be an evolutionary animal to itself, because the law of evolution commands the lack of acceptance of the past. There was a time that I was wondering, to be honest, that this part of the talk, I guess, I'm going to share some content that it's not for the faint of heart, and if you're uncomfortable with it at any point, feel free to navigate away from this page. But I'm going to share something that I think it has certain value to keep alive. You see, certain cultures around the world, they don't acknowledge the world to be just in one, like science, like 3 dimensions of space and one of time. you know they consider it as different dimensions, as if, imagine different colors in the color spectrum were dimensions of their own. There was one dimension where it was pure white. There was one dimension, or let me say it like this: there was one dimension where there was pure red. There was one dimension where it was pure green. There was one dimension pure blue. Imagine. So do you see the difference in multidimensionality? The dimensions don't necessarily have to relate to one another. One thing that I was really shocked, and all young kids, especially at least raised in environments where there is a certain Abrahamic context. Of course, I can speak about my childhood where I was introduced to Islamic ideology. Like, I consider a person's life to be various waves of information, tidal waves of information that hit them throughout the day. And the person, based on what they have held, they choose who to be. So strangely, a child's mind is kind of like, throughout the day as experiences happen, imagine the parents and society constantly throwing clothes at you. When people have expectations of you, it's as if they have dressed you in a certain way in your mind, or better yet, they have addressed you in a certain way, you know so that's the thing. And I often find that it becomes harder to navigate speech in crowds because there is more minds. When more minds come in, there comes more dimensions of subtlety, you know. So in the Islamic context, the revelatory words of the Holy Book seem to be acknowledging a landscape where the words are not just for men. It's for men and another dimension of beings. Now, I don't know why, but in my youth, a lot of stories about the other worlds came to me. A lot of these stories that I share in these talks, like, I had heard them before 15, you know. Not the Zen ones per se, but I'm saying more like the Dervish Sufi ones. And so I was kind of shocked because very openly in the Islamic book, there is an acknowledgement of beings in other dimensions. Do you see? Those who are in a spectrum and hierarchy of ignorance and lack of ignorance. And it seemed like the angel was superior because its will was transparently being the will of the divine will. That means an angel is God's will, but man has choice. And so, in accordance to religion, you know, it seems that when an angel stops listening to the divine will, it falls. So that's an interesting idea. We find this in many narratives. It's like when the context of a certain kingdom of ideology is not accepted, it's like you cannot even access certain concepts. So, just to be specific, it's as if the in the Quran it's saying to mankind and jinn kind, you know. And I found it very interesting that it's as if this ancient book is acknowledging a dimension of other beings and, various other dimensions, a dimension of, paradisal judgment, various dimensions. It's like you see, no idea, an ideology is like a house, and the bigger the ideology is, the more rooms this house has, the more detailed incidents there are in the world of that ideology. So, anyways, there's a suggestion of beings in other realms. You go look at Zen stories, yeah, they also acknowledge beings in other realms. You go look at Vedic thought, you realize, holy shit, they're also acknowledging beings in other dimensions. So you see that the world, actually, our ancestors were entertaining reality more multidimensional than us. And I thought, why? And I noticed a huge thing, guys. It's technology. It's technology, because technology is embodying more of our imagination, so our actual imagination is appearing as less of a virtual reality for us. Let's imagine a regular pilot. A regular pilot enters the plane. There tends to be a co-pilot, and in the plane of existence, there tends to be passengers and there tends to be stewards and hostesses. So we see when the pilot navigates the plane, first of all, the pilot is at most with the co pilot or the stewardess may come to it, but it is fundamentally alone. And the pilot is the important person. That means nobody on a plane is stupid enough to say something negative to the pilot before the plane lifts off. It's as if everybody is trying to make sure this pilot is smiling and definitely like feels confident. You know, imagine a pilot. Imagine a pilot in an airplane, and the pilot's like, guys, I'm gonna do my best, but I'm pretty, I don't feel confident right now, guys, but I'm gonna try for you. People in the plane are gonna panic. Oh my god. The pilot has insecurities. Holy shit. So what I mean is the pilot, it's when the dimensions of other people's existence relies on that being's dimension. So you may right now think your life has no value. You may. You may look at life and feel you're too small to be a big part of it. You may look at it and be like it's meaningless. You may look at it and feel it's empty before it's full. You may look at it and see it's full before empty. Either way, any sort of psychological consequence has to do with the ability to respond. And I find when it comes to the mind, that's when we human beings cannot joke around. Even though I'm playful, but when I say we can't joke around, I mean you have to stop the indecent fragments of your psychology. It's so crucial, guys. Sometimes in life, this is strange, but when it comes to the inner realms, you got to endure. What that means is it's kind of like a strange puzzle when it's like the young kid realizing there's karma and suddenly finds himself in a street fight and is like, holy shit, if I attack this guy, that means it's my karma, I'm starting it. So the person in the street fight, it's like it wants to have the least karma. What does the person do? The person tries to dismantle the fight by mind. That means there are some people who fight physically and there's some people who communicate. And I feel the whole point of our civilization and our minds is that we're moving towards an era of advanced communication. I consider in my whole kind of universe of ideology that The advanced communicator is the stewardess, and the pilot of consciousness is the navigator of the plane of existence. What does that mean? That means there are some people who are in this world right now, they are the pilots of your reality. That means whether you know it or not, it's like every person who their existence influences the systems that others are in. I'm speaking about, think of not just politicians, not the influencers, just think of voices that can be heard, and if heard, they echo as the other. On some level, I say, yeah, we have free will. We can navigate our subjective realm. Same way we move in an objective realm, we can move in a subjective realm. But if we think we are the thought, you get stuck. It's suddenly you solidify. So sometimes, in regards to one's inert kind of internal psychological experience of reality, if you notice, there can be moments where there's different momentum. So what does that mean? There's moments you're gonna feel, holy shit, I've been waiting eons, you know? And there's been and there are moments where you feel, oh my god, everything is going so fast. What is this? Is this like, have miracles found me? Okay. So guys, can you hear me now? If the voice is fine, let me know, guys. I wish. Or let me say it like this: I feel a parallel in a parallel reality of this world we're living in. I playfully have witnessed a sense of myself kind of roaring at the educational system. You know, it's like we're reaching a point where the lions of real experience need to awaken. And it's about the great return. I call it an evolutionary return to nature. The evolutionary return to nature, guys, is really how technology is going to be graceful to kind of let go of us, do you know? That means, okay, maybe that statement I gotta share a bit more about the context. Whew, how do I say this? It's like the feeling is right here, but the image of it is still manifesting for me. Um, okay, consider it like this: we awaken to conscious reality, do we not? If I ask you, do you remember your birth consciously right now? You'll be like, no, man. I just remember at some point in my life just being an individual and living, right? So the individual consciousness, you strangely awaken into it. So that's a way, and there's a way where you can wake up while you're awake, but you don't wake up from something, you wake up to something, to your subjective realms. Let me tell you the power of the subjective realms, guys. This is my mind is sometimes when I go for walks outside, my mind has this playful ability, and I think everybody's mind has. We just don't attempt it. Many of our abilities are hidden to us because we have not dared to attempt it. We have not dared be something that the past didn't want us to be. If you do not have the ability to be the fool of another world, you cannot see another world. If the being cannot have the same amount of contentment with creation and destruction, I find they cannot navigate their subjective realms. If the person is still trying to fulfill a condition, you know, an unconscious condition, then there's no way they have control over their conscious mind, because the way life is happening, guys, this is reality. Right now, if I get super thirsty or super hungry, or suddenly something happens, I have to in some sense leave, for example. But if nothing happens, one abides. Just hold on a second. Okay, guys, I'm back. I want to make it so direct that it can be utilized. What's the perfect example here? I'm looking at my hands right now, and I'm moving my fingers. I see that sometimes there can be an emotion, and sometimes there can be a conscious, subjective thought of why I'm moving my hand. I also remember what I was saying before I left. So as I move my finger, for example, okay, as I move my fingers, I notice the geometry. I notice it's as if they are kind of, it's like the angle is changing, you know? If you, for example, held a cube in your hand and your fingers were in a sort of 90-degree kind of right angle, now you're constantly moving your fingers, for example, and instead of just seeing the movement of your fingers, seeing kind of the degree line. So what I mean is, like, I've had moments where I've walked outside and I've just been walking, and my mind playfully, even sometimes when I've driven and I'm in the highway, my attention has literally been able to run faster than the moment. This was a way I conquered my kind of fear of roller coasters. The way I kind of conquered my fear of roller coasters was that I would imagine myself 3 meters in front of the roller coaster. So I was looking like 3 meters, as if I was imagining myself already having experienced the turn before the turn. What I mean is, just like you look at tiles on a floor at a palace, or a lobby of a hotel in Dubai, you know, when you look at the tiles, for example, you see those lines separating those giant tiles, you know? So imagine you walking throughout the day and every line you see suddenly coming into your attention. Your mind, you having such a realization and sensitivity to your subjective realms that you might not believe it, but right now I could just hold my hand in the air, but there's nothing. It's just my hand in the air. But in my subjective realms, I can see any living shape. I can see shapes animate. So I don't call it any sort of perception. I can't I call it piloting my attention. you know? So what does that mean? That means the relationship of the subjective realm with the objective realm is becoming more intimate. The objective realm, very static laws, you know? It's like, how much can science tell you about your imagination? And the value of the content. That means there has been certain doors that scholars have opened in the intellectual realm, and they've wondered of the necessity of keeping that door open. The more vision you have, the more ability you have to respond, so the more subconscious responsibility you can say the collective conscience is taking in the individual. I found myself in UK Birmingham in a strange situation where I was with my girlfriend at the time, Buried, and we were in a, how can I tell you, we were on a bus and there was this conflict, and we left, and I was walking with her to her place, and suddenly I got to mention some things before. There was a certain conflict at her place, and I just get this strange feeling where my legs lock down into the earth. As if, imagine there was this magnet technology that kind of made my feet get stuck to the ground. This is in 2015 in UK Birmingham. And I just for a second just become super still, as if like I'm a statue, and there is this nonstop thought of call this person, call this person, call this specific person. I had a very kind of street friend at the time. And I just call him, I explain to him the scenario, the situation, and he tells me not to go. He says with such a strange kind of intense response, he says, "Don't go back. Don't go to that place because there's you don't know who that person knows." Like there was some mess up situation, right? So I take Buritan and we go to my place, you know. But I'm saying in that point it was strange. It was out of nowhere. My subjective realm was influencing me prior to an action. And I go through this, and in the morning, Barit goes to her place to check it out because it was in a very bad neighborhood, her place. And uh, she had also, long story short, there was a problem. Um, she comes back the next day telling me, oh my God, you're so smart." And I'm like, why? What happened? And that troublesome thing we were expecting that night actually happened. There were 12 people outside the door of her house, kind of like waiting to fight or something. Like it was a very strange situation, you know. She said that the next morning the neighbor told her that was the situation. So it was one of those moments where I got goosebumps because it was weird. It was a moment where my inner realms moved my outer realms in a way where, regardless of the objective ideology, the emotional reality was dictating the importance, you know. I've had certain moments in my life where strangely I felt like if there was no assistance in that moment from the unknown, I would probably not be here. You know, really, continuity bears with it a sort of eternal confidence. I don't know why, as if the human psychology, as it matures, as it runs more laps around the sun, it's actually strengthening its vision. You're getting more comfortable with confronting stuff, but suddenly it's like it's fascinating too. It's like that roller coaster ride of the great experience. It's like wondering about survival and wondering how the curtain of your last performance of your breath is going to be, or what that last moment is going to be, or wondering just in some sense how much change moves beyond man's comprehension of it. The reason I said when subjects become your subjects, because I noticed that in certain esoteric societies, theosophical societies, even certain religious uh, denominations, there is a confusion. There is a confusion of the wrong fascination for the invisible other. And what that means is the ego has taken control of the body. Now, just entertain me here. Let's say the idea of you has possessed this body. Now, this idea of you, just like how you can go to the store and buy stuff and now you possess that stuff, you own it, right? Now, there has been certain moments in certain esoteric and theosophical societies where they have tried to own the unknown. To be honest, the unknown is like the crystal skull in Indiana Jones. If you really look into its eyes, it's like Friedrich Nietzsche says, you stare in the abyss long enough, it stares back into you. That means certain dimensions of your not psychological progress, but your ideological uh, your ideological self gets resculpted or sometimes even enters the void too long. So really, what many people in life has seen as ego, like the root of selfish kind of hatred and inefficiency. To be honest, the ego is really a 50-50 balance. So what it is we are a bunch of beings freaking out because we don't know anything. Because we're freaking out, we've sparked our own knowledge, sparked our own meaning, and are just living through it, only to come to realize that there is more than our own creation. That means, trust me, there are times that I even listen to my own talks and I'm like, I'm, I like, I get every person's mind is, I think, in two dimensions being entertained. One dimension is how much the world is seen anew, and the other dimension is how much emotions are allowed to participate in the animation of it. You know, what that means is freedom and discipline are like a black and white dragon coiling, spiraling around one another, going towards the sky. And me and you are watching. And so the dragon of freedom in certain countries is further up. And in certain countries, the dragon of discipline is further up. And so really, it's strange because it's kind of like um, enjoying something is a different state than creating it. Like when you make a cake, while you're making it and putting the ingredients, you can't eat it there. That would defeat like that. It's not a cake then, right? So it's like the process of creating something is very different than the process of editing or reviewing something or tasting something. You know. I have questioned my own honor many times. There's been times where I have felt, especially in my childhood, it was more, I felt dishonored by karma. Not by people even. Like I didn't even care what people did. It was like I was like at that point, why is the world treating me this way? You see? It's kind of you can say common sense that if you give a heavy weight to a child, it's gonna be more intense for it. So it's like certain realities, children's mind, it's gonna be too intense for them to process. Simply because the mind, you shouldn't just speed through it. It has a gradual development. That means that when I heard that the brain was a muscle, I'm like, oh my god, now my mind has to go to the gym. So what I mean by that is like that exercise was really wonder. And as J.R.R. Tolkien, this great writer of the Lord of the Rings books and The Hobbit, this guy at the age of 14, evidently he was under this table in the UK where it was the city was being bombed, and he couldn't go anywhere. It's as if the karma of that situation was like, kid, you got to stay under this table for now. So this kid was under this table, and where did he have to go? He went into his inner realms, and then he brought forth he witnessed the archetypes that dwell in his unconscious, and he brought them forth. And that became Frodo. When subjects become your subject, this is a choice that every person in the world has. And the world is so unique that you may see the fools be the kings of the future, you know, or the wisest become the fools of the future. You don't you'll in some sense the world changes in many ways. You have to give freedom. The same freedom you want the world to give you, you have to give your mind. You have to confront a solitude that renders you void in the face of every judgment ever done. Every idea that has ever visited your attention, you suddenly notice the attention that was there. And so you suddenly get access to, you can be playful, you can say whatever, your long-term memory. Your long-term memory enters your conscious realm. When your long-term memory enters the conscious realm, you kind of realize that it's as if before you were like an eagle on a branch of a certain archetype, a certain identity, but now you are kind of like an eagle that's flying in the sky. You're on no branch. You're identifying with nothing, yet you see all the identities. You see all the hidden dormant archetypes. And you eventually can see that in accordance to how the intentions for speech arise, certain emotions arise with it. So really, I will advise this because, as I say, the world is we are all advanced communicators, and because the ultimate realization of the advanced communicator is you are the advanced communication of the universal sector. Are you not? Are you not nature's voice? Are you not the eyes of existence in the now? And so, what grandest honor can there be than conscious being? It's as if what greater heaven can you desire? You're here to be somewhere, to be something, to experience it all. So there's something good about the inner realms that the outer realms does not permit. Your objective realms don't allow this, but your subjective realms do. And it's the non-consequence. There's no consequence to chaotic thought if it's not brought into the objective realm. So that means it's like nobody feels guilty about having any sort of thought. Do you know what I mean? Like it's like it's as if we're each in our own realities, in our own rooms, and when we enter society, we decide how much we want to open the door of who we are to the world. I want to tell you that when you ask where is the multiplicity, the multidimensionality of your beliefs occurring, the recognition of the language threshold, silence, stillness, the father and mother of all movement and noise. You will not be able to navigate through speech if you cannot navigate, be present in silence. My greatest recommendation to any conscious being is that uh, there is a hidden joy in finding eyes that were free from the start. There is a hidden joy to realizing you entered the linguistic simulation, you awakened in it. So, what does that mean? That means we become an observer of the observer. And in the Upanishads, they say there's no way, Jose. In the Upanishads, they say the seer of the seen is unseen. What does that mean? That means the soul of your soul is cannot be seen. It doesn't mean it's not there. It just means it cannot be seen. Hence, the ultimate evolution of one dimension into the revelation of another. That's what it is, guys. We are right now in a strange situation where 8 billion people, it's as if their communication with others, with the world around them, is them creating a portal to their inner realms. And I find when our inner realms have as much comfort as our outer realms, that's when the greatest ideas begin kind of seeking a network to fulfill it. So we have to kind of, I had this vision, and I've sat down many nights wondering, okay, civilization, what's it gonna look like? Like there's one thing, yeah, you go in the mirror and you wonder, okay, like, okay, how's my hair gonna be? And based on the like how can I tell you? Like the person, some people before picking up the comb are wondering how the civilization is going to comb its hair. Do you know? And what I mean by that is, like, I could totally see how Einstein didn't care about his hair. Do you know? Because there were matters of significance in which the question of the simple would be a lack of awareness to the value of the complex. Certain realms, you require complexity. I say the ability, so it's pretty much like this. If I was to create a model for it, I wish I had a whiteboard here, but, anyways. At least the ink of the pen of the notepad of the mind never runs out. Are we just stories hovering in emptiness? Is emptiness's evolution a sort of infinite fulfillment? What is the meaning of a temporary life? Where can an individual, objective, temporary creature go? Its opposite would be everything that all the kind of spiritual finger points to. I feel there will come a moment where the person will get tired of the falsehood, and they begin questioning the path of their endurance. There are many moments in life where the subjective realms may mistreat the person. You know, there's a saying, they say the mind is a lousy master, but a great servant. What does that mean? That means if you do not exert your free will and you go and participate in civilization, the programs of nature will conquer the space of your attention. So you will ultimately become the voice of the environment. The whole point of true strength, you see, there's some people who, of course, they're physically have incredible strength, but there are some people who, this is those black sheep you see in society, do you know? And I'm saying this playfully, but the idea is that there's some people who they fought language, the language of their minds as a kid. That means I say that my kind of childhood, I was fighting language. And little did I know I was fighting it through silence, as if lots of waves of data and information would hit me, but I would not identify with them. It's as if I could notice thoughts passing by like people in the street. I find civilization's greatest success is in trying to maintain or at least wonder about the natural kind of ecosystem based evolution of the being. Nowadays it's like we are um, seeking enhancements in unnatural environments rather than naturally enhancing in natural environments. I find that it is one of the most divine moments where the nostalgia for the unknown finds the person. And of course, in a civilization that is like a machine right now, I'm telling you, if an extraterrestrial civilization landed and looked at our civilization, like you know, I'm saying, like, I'd be embarrassed. I'd be embarrassed. They'd be like, "Holy shit, you guys aren't advanced. You're still violent." It's like violence is the most noob thing for a civilization to do, because the civilization has not understood the value of the mind. Do you know that same competitive violence you find in the streets? Do you know how much more entertaining it is when minds fight? That was when minds fight. That was the school of Athens. It wasn't a boring place. It was where philosophers were peacefully standing at their own podiums, in a sense, you know, and their minds were at war, and that war was playful, that war was non-consequential. It was only when the truths of the inner realm you have to make real in the outer realm, that's when a sort of strange tyranny occurs, you know. That means it's like a monk who, the village is under attack, and the monk is like, holy shit, I've renounced violence, what do I do, you know? And the monk, in some sense, in that moment just holds a rake. And the monk has no fighting experience but has a lot of trusting the moment experience, you know. And in that moment, it's as if His childhood, when he would play with a stick, all those ideas came back to him. For some reason, his hands had access to the perfect memory, even though his consciousness could have not. And he saw himself not fighting. Like it's as if everybody in the battlefield, imagine, was like, I'm going to kill you, you know, running savagely, right? But this guy was like as if he was in a yard, you know, just doing Tai Chi, you know what I mean? Like, in behind his eyes, he was not at war. And that's why karma honored him. The lords of karma honor the being who has understood the value of putting the weapon down. There's a strange hidden, um, I don't know, I'm just telling you, it's just to be poetic. The moment the person puts down the inefficient technologies, the future selves of humanity, like angels, celebrate. So, what I mean by that is there is a value for history, some of your actions. You know? Sometimes I pick up trash because I'm like, holy shit, a little kid. Like sometimes I mean, it's not the coolest thing to do. But like I've walked and I've noticed somebody like who's failed their shot of throwing trash, and I'm like, walk right beside it. I'm like, okay, whatever, here. But I make sure I like make the least amount of contact, so it becomes like a geometrical challenge at that point. But what I'm saying is that for a second I was like, if a little kid sees less of a dirtier street, perhaps there'd be less of a dirtier feeling in civilization. You know, because there was a time in it was in Italy. I think the Medici family did it. A lot of enlightened kings in history did it. You know, and what was this? They had this mentality. They're like, holy shit, people are living in a city in an environment, and this environment is influencing their minds. That means people are technically a percentage of their thoughts and mind is being the environment. You know, the actual external environment. And the Medici family, for example, started making what do you call it? Like the city beautiful. So imagine suddenly you stepped out of your house and you were in the most incredible, geometrical, beautiful, artistic city. And the idea was that when the person felt like, holy shit, this is awesome, awesome ideas emerged. So you see, it's a way of the evolution of the person's mind by the evolution of the environment. And strangely, the only thing that's been evolving in our environment is the technology. It's as if, what the hell are people doing with their lives? That it's only technology evolving. That I still see, you know, it becomes a kind of like, there's a saying, they say habit is the decay of the mind. Sometimes, I mean, it's strange. I mean, it's maybe like an idiosyncrasy for me. But I get kind of fed up with how much rectangular and cubic structures there are. I'm like, holy shit, did we not think of doing anything else? You know? And so it's because we care about monetary value, we do not care about art. When art dies in the most important sectors of society, the artistic vision, the ability to update, update, update. And what are you updating? You're updating by hearing the voices of the new. New people being born means new minds accessing certain dimensions, their own unique genetical pattern of the world. That means eventually you will reach a point where you cannot compare yourself to anything. So in that moment, you're like, oh my God, how can I judge consciousness, really? You know, how could people judge the innocence of consciousness? Please tell me this isn't on mute. Okay. Okay. It's not. All right. So, yeah, guys. So that's the idea. I feel civilization is too mechanical. It's a machine. It doesn't care. It's like a system where it's like a giant horse that we have to feed it, but this horse is not driven anywhere. you have to ask yourself, if the greatest version of you was here right now, how would it look at you? Would it look down on you, or would it be inspired? So, what I mean by that is that sometimes when a person, like, think of it this way: throughout the day, you move, you can say more than 50%. I think for the average person, it's like 80% physical reality oriented and maybe 20% uh, kind of non physical oriented. That means they care about thoughts through the day, maybe 20%, and 80% is just activities in life, you know? I find, here's the thing, you tell me, like, I find the terrace I'm standing at is somewhere where any person like can actually share their opinion on this. I feel that we have to build a better earth, which means as a caterpillar have the intention to enter a cocoon state. I find that cocoon state is the wisdom of an individual being to look at things through a strange and odd neutrality. So clinical sword, it's probably either how air is moving through my system, like it's a sound from my nasal cavity, or it's probably this apple juice I'm drinking. You know, but that's I'll keep that in mind, guys. Sorry, I'll mute it when I'm drinking something. I'm just saying, 8 billion creatures on a planet, regardless of how much you care for it or not, it's cool. It's like an odd situation. So you're looking at the design of this odd situation, you're like, okay, 8 billion creatures. Now you're seeing these 8 billion human beings, they look at when they look outside, everything else appears to them as objective. But when they wonder about who they are, it appears as subjective and unknown, right? So 8 billion people with an unknown access to uh, phenomenology moving in a different way, you know? I mean, I don't know. I haven't shaved recently, so I don't know. Sorry, guys, I'm just responding to the chat section. I find it's like, yeah, on one level, overpopulation, people don't care about the environment, they don't even care about the atmosphere and the shitload of satellite debris that's going to be there eventually. So it's like we are at a point where we are not conscious of our world. That's the issue with hedonism. It would be okay to be hedonistic if you are alone on an island, but when you're here in a place where your ancestry lived for something, then that has to be attended to somehow, you know, regardless of how much you as a person may be upset with your, for example, lineage from your ancestors or whatever. But you got to realize at some point. Yeah, man. Sometimes I can't locate what part of the talk you are kind of commenting on. So you got to make that clear, man. But ultimately, world's going to an end is just an implication of change, and there's certain parts of change you can control where your free will is colored in, and there's certain parts of change you cannot control where it is the inevitable unknown. Don't worry, man. The flight is still continuing. Sorry, guys. I should probably make it clear when I'm responding to the chat section. But anyways, guys, it's an image. You know, what's the point of words if they don't paint an image? How do you remember them then? You gotta really love language if you want to remember words if they don't paint an image. We read books, and what is that? It's ink on a piece of paper. Our attention has the sophistication of seeing images behind it that our experience has provided. Being sensitive to your intelligence is crucial. On some level, I am giving my own analysis and models on how I feel consciousness is developed, but at the same time, I'm telling you every person should ask the question for themselves because nobody else has their eyes. The civilization has to acknowledge a strange integration of their inner realms. And it's happening already. I mean, that's the whole, me and you are like in the pioneer phase of it. We are in the pioneer phase of the cyberspace culture and the wisdom that will require. That means there may come a time our great grandchildren are going to be like, "Holy shit! Am I living in a video game right now?" That's pretty much cyberspace philosophy for you. You know, is reality a simulation? Or is it some complex power structure of hierarchical forces beyond the realm? So the mind has an ability to acknowledge many things, but really, I wanted to kind of respond strangely in this talk to my own past, where I was introduced to certain cultures where esoteric ideology was I could understand how people like magic was fascinating to people, like how fire was, you know, how an invention is. Like I can understand how there were people who wanted to, in some sense, use the forces of the universe, in some sense, thinking that their archetype is the owner. So it's kind of funny. It's like when the concept of God arises for the person, just when they get this thought that there's a creator or not, there's something strange. It's like you ate a food and you got a taste that's now in your memory. So, and of course, nowadays it's like its culture requires to have some sort of contentment with that idea. It's kind of like on one level, sure, thinking you're just one being, but on another level, seeing that the whole point of sight is reflection. And what it is like enlightenment is another way of saying how is the light in your eyes. Oh, interesting. So guys, clinical sword says so in the comment section. So basically, continue, embrace, and make an effort that could be used to better this virtual world hypothetically. Um, Kinda, yeah. I'm kind of saying like it's the what if situation. It's like imagine we're all sitting on a couch looking at the cosmos and being like, okay, what if? What? We're like, what if 8 billion beings somehow, like we don't know the solution. Sometimes it's okay to look at a problem even if you don't have the solution, you know. So we're kind of being like, okay, 8 billion beings, ultimate resolution, objectively extinction, subjectively unknown, we don't know. Like that's the existential briefing so far, you know. So we kind of reach a point where we're like, what if? I mean, these 8 billion beings are conscious. They're able to speak languages and communicate. What if there was some strange wave of renaissance of communication that occurred, that human beings began realizing that before discriminating, they should be fascinated by the complexity that dwells in every person's eyes? Do you know? So what that means is it's a reversion. So you feel you know, and you feel the world is unknown. There will come a moment where you will be unknown and you feel the world is known. You will suddenly know everything about the world, but the self will be unknown. And there will come a moment where it's as if like you will know everything about the self and the world will be unknown. You oscillate. The mind can oscillate between these. But at the same time, I don't want to downplay the concept of enlightenment for you, because really it was one of those things where Sri Ramana Maharshi said to Papaji, where Papaji was dancing on this mountain as a yogi, and Sri Ramana Maharshi's like, yo, what are you doing? You know, and Papaji's like, I'm dancing with Krishna. I'm dancing with God right now. He comes to me sometimes and I dance. And Sri Ramana Maharshi says to him one of the most profound sentences in history. He says, a God that comes and goes is not the real God. So I'm not telling you that the ultimate state is a dualistic. I'm not telling you bow to some dualistic system of your own interpretation. I'm saying that in life there are dimensions to acknowledge. And the most basic way I entertain different models. So tonight I'm going to use the model of just imagine the numbers 0, 1, 2, and instead of 3, I'm going to say, I'm going to say 3, but you can think of infinity, you know? So think of it as infinity. So that means there's a dimension right now, the intelligence of the moment is existing, that is void. There's a dimension right now that all of it is from a singular source. There's a dimension right now that all of it is held in chaos and order, yin yang duality kind of stuff. Do you know? And then there's the third dimension, where I also call it the infinite dimension, because duality is the father of infinity. That means the moment your attention, your conscious attention, you can say the soul steps out of the dualistic fields, it gets access to the archetype, to infinite reflections of its archetypes. So it's as if in your mind there are certain states where, if you, the way you are projecting yourself as a self, if you do it in that kind of shifted perception, or I can say attention, then you suddenly see the meaning change. So it's like right now, in order to talk about something, me and you are kind of caging the real world and concepts, and somehow in the sequencing of images, we're communicating, right? The fascinating thing is light is required to see. So how can we see it? You know, sometimes I think that our minds are definitely solar powered. Our imaginations are solar powered. Without light, there is no shape to entertain. So you see, you gotta realize this. This is why I'm saying it's so important how you enter the unknown. You gotta find your voice. And the best way I want to explain this is not really as so, like in a kind of mystical context. I want to explain it as if it's like a writer. Imagine you wanted to be a writer right now. Just imagine. And you as a writer right now, you had the pen, you had the paper, and you're like, what am I going to write? You know? Now you try it and you write a sentence and you see the sentence is like, it's not even, it's like you don't feel it's just something you, there comes eventually so much repetition. Imagine every day writing a sentence. You know, after some point, you will have a strange comfort to externalize your voice, your inner voice on paper. You know, and eventually, after long, long periods of experience or observing subjective change, you eventually become a presence in the moment. And I find when you become a present in the moment, it becomes the opposite. It's like you become the answer to all your questions. The source is no longer outside of you. And that means there even the dualistic dimension of within and without even goes. You see, it's like, think of it this way. I want you to imagine you are sitting in the most grandest auditorium in the most VIP seat of this old school kind of opera house, you know? And you're sitting there and kind of judging as if you are like the king of the moment, and let's say you are in that moment. And so as the king of the moment, you're looking at the stage observing as an audience member. And then the performance begins, and an actor comes with a mask and does the greatest performance. And at the end, this actor takes off his mask only for the person, the greatest king and audience member, to see that it was himself behind the mask. I find that we need to have the same hunter gatherer dexterity for our subjective realms. I noticed the correlation, the same kind of physical, objective, non civilized savageness that our ancestors were kind of in. That is not physically here. Now we're very civilized compared to a long time ago, but our subjective realms are still savage. So what that means is our subjective realms, our the ego is still hunter gatherer level psychology. All egos are hunter gatherer psychology. Only when you are willing to observe more and truly, that's when the world really opens up to you. Aside from that, it's as if the world knows if you're seeing it right. And in no way I'm trying to say that. I said, like, remember, just acknowledge these dimensions, that at some point in this life, because there is change, because there is death, because there is things coming and going, it's in some sense you have to acknowledge the void. So the moment you can acknowledge the void, a level of, like, certain aspects of your psychology calm down. They become content. Sometimes because the person hasn't accepted something, their better karma doesn't come to them. Sometimes because they have a certain point in life maybe brought up a need for them to observe their subconscious, and the person cowered away from their conscience. You can hide from your own intentions, you subconscious intentions. You as a human being could be have a certain orientation, as if you're piloting your mind in a certain direction in life, and suddenly something can take your attention and you can totally pilot your reality that direction. Even when you see in the psychology of lovers, especially in media, you see what's going on. You see, it's as if two lovebirds, in some sense, piloting their realms, and eventually finding the same branch that they could sit on. You know, but their attention defined their destination. So really, it becomes crazy because the world is becoming so much more exciting in a strange way, even though it's not the best right now. Like, I will not accept the civilization in 2020 as advanced. No way. Even if you tell me, hey man, you want to take a tour of the CERN Hadron Collider, I'll be like, no. It's like, I know, you know. I've seen the documentary on it. Sometimes, like, it's a strange statement, but it's as if somebody coming up to you and saying, who said you need to be a thought all the time? Who said you have to be an endless shape? What if the mind can just simply observe the shape? What if that opera singer that takes the mask off is that same face as the audience member? The shock of that is fascinating, you know. Guys, I want to share something. This is my intention. You cannot expect the external reality to 24/7 abide with your inner reality. That means your objective truths and personal truths will sometimes be in sync, sometimes will not be in sync. When they are in sync, if you trust your subjective realm or objective realm, it doesn't matter. The outcome is okay. But when they are not in sync, if you trust the objective realm, you will feel as if your subjective life is away. And if you trust your subjective realm, you will literally not be seeing the world. You'll be seeing only your world. So I found a great wisdom in letting the ripples on the pond settle if the mind was such. So really, when you treat your mind as holy shit, it's like we're not a machine. We're not like we can read like I don't understand the self-help industry. It's like, what is this? This was the reason I'm like, okay, who said language before money existed? People spoke. You know. If you cannot find your freedom here, you cannot find it anywhere else. If you cannot see the greatest self right beside your worst self, I don't see how else the pilot can navigate the wings of the plane. Chaos should not scare the person. Order should not scare the person. Jordan Peterson says something very fascinating that in him reading the mysterious writings of Carl Jung, in his eyes, he, in some sense, unraveled this concept that the person has to acknowledge the shadow and the monster within, right? I don't think he said within, but but you know me. But Jordan Peterson, just to get back to the seriousness of it all, Jordan Peterson said through Carl Jung's ideology, he was kind of introduced to this notion that you got to you got to confront like the shadow, the monster within. You got to learn from your failures as much as you got to observe your failures as much as you observe your victories. And when you can be content with both, it's like, let me tell you, I found a strange loop in, at least I could say, the psychology of man. That if you think a couple steps ahead, the step you will take next is not a burden. So if you think more than two steps ahead, or let's say three steps ahead, so every environment you go in, just like a chessboard, you wonder three different variations of how the environment could occur, you know? The more the person trusts their moment, the more access, the more they can move as the conscious moment. Not move as like the more there is internal authorization for subjective freedom. And this is the unique thing. I think the only unique thing that kind of I'm bringing to this is that I'm telling people we got to start acknowledging the subjective realm as a subjective realm. So do you know, imagine we see one person is upset. Imagine you see a family member is upset, you know? Regardless, guys, I'm just some guy in a universe of a billion trillion stars talking about stuff. Ultimately, I asked myself questions, and these questions went further than my personal realm. And that's when you really find a value in philosophy, when you want to see how the eyes of other people in history looked at the world. There's many moments in life, I think, that you can just render them meaningless. You can just look at the moment and be like, this is just shapes and color in a screen of observance. I find, guys, true intelligence goes beyond the language threshold. That means the person experiences something that cannot be contained as a self in a world or a world in a self. I find that it's like the mind, if you were to pilot it, you gotta know how to elevate, go through different elevations. So that means you gotta be content with the simple, you gotta be content with the complex. That's one duality. You got one axis you got to entertain, and then there's kind of contentment with the known and contentment with the unknown. That's another axis. You know, guys, I'm going to respond to a very interesting comment from Clinical Sword in the chat section. You say, should we really bother fixing it, or it was just better off? It was a lost cause either way. So this kind of like fixing the environment you're suggesting. So let me tell you, I'm saying if I think that way, if I walk in that tunnel of thought, that should we really bother? I mean, really, no. Because it takes a lot of energy and it makes sense to just bask in your own cave, just live in your own bunker of joy before the whole thing dismantles. Like, sure, like that is a way. What I feel, it's easier to do nothing than something. So one way I kind of see the purpose in life is like not to take the easy way out, but at the same time, I'm telling you, it's this very playful, philosophical kind of counter to the situation. Why not fix it? And why fix it is that why not? And so, if you were to ask yourself, why shouldn't I experience, let's say, the greatest potential of my intelligence in the moment? You see, if like that question doesn't arise, you wouldn't even care about how much you see. So it's strange. That question is required because this was the main shift. I remember my grandfather giving me a clue about it, but later on I realized all the ancient wisdom was kind of pointing to it, right? One day my grandfather came and he said, wherever you go, want the greatest. And I was like, okay, you know. And for a long time, like what he said kind of was, it was just I put it in the drawer of my mind. Until one day I realized, as in Zen they say, climb the mountain by starting at the top, and how important that is. That if you are a person that you have to have an ego. So at least you have free will to choose the ego, right? You might not have free will, like it's like you have a face, but you can choose the facial expression, can you not? You know? So it's as if like a certain part of it is given, like an automatic test on a question on a test, and a part of it you have to engage and involve it, right? So I'm kind of seeing this situation that these 8 billion beings must have a certain ability to speak the same language by being able to be drawn by the same vision. It would be as if like this strange event happens and every person in the world suddenly tunes into it. Do you know? It's kind of a strange idea, but it's like an apocalypse is a strange uh, overall change. It's as if like the unity of the empty. You see, the mind can entertain something in various ways. On some level, I'm responding to clinical sort in the chat section. Like, listen, man, like this is the situation. I think on some level, we can do nothing, or we can do something. Now, doing something seems more new than doing nothing. All or every person in history who was kind of like passed away is like they can't do anything anymore. So if I don't do anything on this planet, it's as if I'm dead on the planet. You know, I have this kind of feeling. In certain, I think it's in the Islamic context. It's strange, but it's like it's not just that. It's like in Christianity and Judaism that like some sort of apocalyptic event. It's as if the sky shatters. Imagine the sky shattering like glass. Anyways, guys, as Aristotle says, it's the sign of an educated mind to entertain an idea without accepting it. I find myself kind of like, it's strange, but emotions are like rare events, like true emotions, you know? It's like emotions are something becomes important enough, and it's as if the intelligence is trying to access all its resources in the moment. That's when your long term in an emergency, your long term memory just activates instantly. When subjects become your subjects, guys, something to say is that I also have like a kind of dedicated a large portion of my writings on the relationship man has with geometry, and geometry as a sort of abstract movement in its subtler planes of imagination or awareness. Okay, so I've kind of wondered about the relationship of not just reality, or the reality of the self with awareness, but the reality, but the real, but the real, but the real. Guys, I'm not saying I'm a robot. Okay. I'm just saying, like, treat language and thought as artwork that you're perceiving in the moment. Then you will free yourself, like the shackles of the titan were put by itself, by its subconscious that was a god. There's certain things that if the person really is, I consider that if the inner realms and the outer realms are too off, this is the problem that happens when a person is dishonest or lies, right? So if and I find it's strange, but sometimes, and when the suffering enters your life quick, that's kind of a strange blessing. It's like you got access to that data quicker, to that information, to those realms of access at least, you know. There was something about, I don't know why, but I feel I should share this. The martial artist that had to fight a group of people, and there was one martial artist where his approach was instantly knock out, make unconscious all the opponents. So this martial artist attacked, you know? There was a martial artist who, instead of fighting the six people, attacking first, you know, by attacking first, he could choose a sort of like shifting his location. But there was a martial artist who didn't attack and was just looking at the movement of every person, as if his peripheral vision and his current vision were no longer segmented, you know? And this martial artist could see how he can move the movement. It's like as if he could think further ahead of how that person would already move, and it would, like, rather than fighting, you would just deviate different patterns. So it's like one way of fighting is you attack, you defeat your opponent. And if you take the conquer approach, it has to be instantaneous. That means, what's the most vicious conquer in nature, you know? There's of course the lion, but I want to say, like, the snake is one of them too, an instant attack, you know? There are many creatures that they're kind of in nature designed to just with one attack dismantle their opponent, right? Like the danger level of these creatures is high, for example. Like this man named Sadhguru, he said he was walking at night, like in the forest, and he suddenly sees something where he thinks it's like a cobra, like a giant cobra standing in the moonlight. And he goes and he sees it's a branch, you know? And in India, people somehow are more comfortable with snakes. In India, snakes are like the rats, but it's strange. I don't know how people in India are so comfortable with that, you know? But nature is nature, of course. And I'm just trying to say that there is a difference between resisting and achieving and not resisting and just becoming. I feel people's intelligence is locked down by their own resistance to how life is simulated as a reality for them. I feel like the multidimensional renaissance is going to kind of, you know, reinvent the School of Athens. And I call it like School of Athens 2.0. And it's kind of like, how would I say it, guys? It's like this view I had that, imagine 8 billion minds in the most fascinating intellectual gladiator arena. And when I say intellectual, that means it's like right now we're watching sports, right? We're watching sports on TV, but imagine you change the channels and you see it's like endlessly groups of human beings in dialogue, you know? The School of Athens was so badass. Can you imagine? Just like, I could totally see how that was like like a football stadium that a person wanted to get into. Like the School of Athens was like, of course it was a school, but I'm saying, like, the person had the same excitement because you'd go in there and you'd see philosophers say words that no man had ever heard before, and it was just like hearing and just imagining that was like unique. Language is always a kind of exchange thing. It's like sometimes in esoteric cultures they have this concept of initiation, you know, and I was always preferenceless to it. I'm like, what is this? It's like, what is initiating what? And then I came to this realization that it's the initiation of an acknowledgement of more either of more depth to the moment. Now, this doesn't mean this is correct. I'm just saying reality is one of those things where it was before like a painting on the wall. Now it's actually a living movie, you know? So it's as if like your mind is a living movie. You're living in that movie as a character. And now when you realize that movie is like a pen in your hand and you can rewrite the scene in any way, so you find a strange freedom, you know? Really, you have to wonder, and you got to ask yourself what questions matter to you. It's as if before finding answers in your life, sit down and ask yourself what are really questions that I feel if I move towards finding answers to, my life will just be like I will see beyond what I'm seeing now, right? So I remember the first sentence. I feel every writer will kind of cherish the first sentence, at least in their personal realm. The first sentence they ever truly wrote. And the first sentence I ever wrote was, I don't want to live in a world that looks the same the next day. I felt that was a sentence that I, for the first time, wrote ever. You know, I don't know why. Like, but that was a very unique kind of moment. For me, language has incredible architecture. Actually, the subjective realm can animate in any way. You know, you can look at a cup and think of the whole universe is in a cup. You know, you can look at any object and fractalize it subjectively and feel the whole macrocosm falls into that structure. You know, there's some people who there's a church of Fonzie. You know, so sorry guys, this thing was on mute. This has happened before, don't worry. It's like, but unfortunately, I don't know where I ended off, so I gotta just go with what I was saying. But thanks for letting me know. I was speaking about really that the mind of people open up to the world differently when you can honor the unknown dimensions within yourself. You will understand people have unknown dimensions, and you'll suddenly realize the wisdom of the ages, starting from the ancient Greeks that said, again, to tame the savageness of man and make gentler the life of this world. And Bertrand Russell saying, like, you gotta have tolerance for the future generations. And so, guys, thanks for reminding me, Clinical Sword. So I was saying Church of Fonzie. Okay, I was saying Church of Fonzie and how the mantra in the Church of Fonzie is "Hey," and really how I was just giving an example of how the mind moves in different, it inhabits different ideological structures in certain moments, and really its emotions have to do with how much its objective energy can maintain its subjective phenomenology. When you're tired, you know the person is more agreeable. That means if you go ask tired people, you know they'll agree with you more. So energy levels do influence psychology. There's so many factors. You know, I consider the most important one being how like the planet is getting a full body tan, and like in the sun. And so that this constant on and off switch has really been the evolution of the heartbeat, has it not? As if there was just this kind of conscious phenomena, and this conscious phenomena, there was constantly darkness on it, and then there was light, darkness, light, darkness, light, darkness, light. So whenever there was light, it's as if things moved. Whenever there was darkness, things were static. Things moved, things static, things moved, things static. It's like, isn't that kind of like our heartbeat? So we can kind of even see from how the light of the sun has been hitting the surface of the earth like an on and off switch, the evolutionary pattern for even the heartbeat has arrived. You can potentially attribute it to that, I find. You know, for me, light is a very unique thing. I've even had this hypothesis that the whole universe, the whole cosmos is inside the sun, right? But that's I say hypothesis. The mind being the master of the moment is kind of like how it's a lousy master is really how the programs of how the environment is defining you more than your intelligence defining the environment. That's the key, guys. That's the free will. The free will is moving first, like it's the first move on the chessboard. The first piece moving. If you move reality first, you will probably trust it more than somebody else moving reality. And this is why I say in these talks, guys, that hopefully the best thing they can be is a mirror that you realize it is your mind animating the sounds that you hear. So it's eventually you realize you have known your reality, your inner realms all along. You know, there's I've in a science fiction novel of mine, there's a unique kind of character I've created, which is noteworthy to share in this talk. So there's the whole kid, the whole story centers around this strange kind of divine kid, as if he's on the second dimension before he reaches heaven or something, the ultimate heaven in the story. And in the story, there's a god. I've created this god called. Of course, this is a science fiction story, guys. Don't overreact to what I'm saying here. This in this science fiction story, I created this kind of figure of like the archetypal kind of position of the god is this eagle-headed kind of humanoid being where its wings, each feather of its wings, is like a universe. And that god I called it Farian, Farian, right? So in this science fiction novel, there's a character, this young kid named Farda, and Farda in the Farsi language means tomorrow. So this kid, like he kind of like the characters in my story, their names are like their actual characteristics. Certain core like their essence. So in this science fiction novel of mine, this is the situation where, sorry guys, um, pretty much this kid Farda, whenever he's in a situation where he's in a critical condition, he's about to die, the whole world and the whole moment just pauses, and suddenly the whole existence becomes geometric. And there's this character I've created that is the Archangel of Farian, which is, his name is Lord Mistos the Messenger, the geometrical messenger. And this is a being who, it's like half of his body is like kind of like relatively like humanoid, and then the rest of his body is just infused in the geometrical dimension. And before this kid dies, like, this archangel comes and just is like, the whole world pauses and everything turns into geometrical lines and light patterns. And then this archangel appears in a room with this main kid before he was about to die, right? And then he has a conversation with the kid, and the kid suddenly gets a realization from the conversation. And when he enters that moment, he sees, it's as if the whole moment's character has shifted, you know. So of course, this science fiction novel I'm writing is, I can't explain it in this talk, it's too big. But that was a part of it. That was a unique thing that I'd created, a sort of mythology to the world of a sort of consciously the person had created, right? And so when we realize what is art is what we are doing behind our eyes, simply externalizing and being in sync with our objective being. That's really what speech is. When I was younger, communication and speech. The kid, the kid, does he die in this story? Um, it's kind of strange. He doesn't die. He, in another book I've written, the ultimate event of that book is the main character. The whole purpose of that book was that the main character of that universe, he in some sense is there to escort this kid called the Golden Star Child, right? And it's like the Golden Star Child is this rare kind of being that appears in a rare moment, like as if like the expression, the archetype of the expression of kind of the ultimate divine. And in some sense, the main character in that book, which is called The Messenger of Giants, the kid suddenly comes into this realm, into the human realm, and just touches a few objects. And the kid, the only person that can escort him is the purpose of the main character. Yeah, yeah, I got that. I'm telling you, it's like, so what happens? Excuse me. Let me see. Where did I? In the Messenger of Giants, the main character, his name is Rasul. This is not this is not finalized, but I'm just going to give you a preview. The event is something like the whole people of all the realms. It's like the main character's purpose is to just escort this incredibly rare divine being, you know? And this rare divine being, for just 10 minutes, enters the physical dimension, and all the people in all the parallel dimensions of this universe I've created are all watching this event. It's the rarest thing that's ever happened. And this person, Rasul, who everybody in the world, somehow I did something cool where every person in the world knows him. But anyways, So Rasul escorts him, and this is kind of reaching the finale where he escorts this golden star kind of child, which is actually Farda, that kid where our Archangel Mystios came to. And this golden star child, as Rasul escorts him, he escorts him out of the physical dimension. So all the people in the world suddenly see the golden star child disappear, and the body of Rasul disappear, do you know? And there's a scene of all the other beings who kind of were walking strangely in other dimensions with this, all of them also like the human being. So, guys, check this out. It gets even more intense. They reach a certain point where all the Rasul, the main character, and this kid, what happens to them? They're moving beyond this dimension, and it's. I just wanted to create this imagery where Rasul and this kid are on such an enlightened plane that Rasul doesn't need to leave his body, but every other being who's leaving their body, it right the moment they go through this kind of dimensional pathway. On the other side, there's galactic beings taking their physical body, and the person stepping out of like the souls being attended to by a galactic association. Like it's really next level what I've written, guys. You know, so what happens? This is reaching the finale of it. You know, I can't say more than this. So what happens? Rasul escorts the golden star child, this rarest being of all universes. You know, which is Farda. You know, and you know what happens to Farda? Because that's why I was saying this to you, Clinical Sword, in the chat section. You know what happens to that kid? The moment Rasul goes in that dimension, he sees that kid was not a kid. He was the central sun of all existences. So he sees that that kid, that golden star child, was the center of all universes, right? So when he sees that, I remember writing it in my book. That's when Rasul, the main character, didn't need to be a thought anymore, and he, in some sense, that's a moment where he has reached the epitome of non-wisdom. Sorry, not of non-wisdom, of wisdom, to a point where he has now moved being the unknown, right? So that's the thing, guys. There's of course more to this. I will share it in other episodes. Maybe I might dedicate a channel to these science fiction stories that I've developed. But anyways, that was the point. I just wanted to say there was a point where the kid experienced suddenly the whole world turning geometric. When I say when subjects become your subjects, that's a way of your conscious attention navigating subjectivity in sync with your objectivity. So what does that mean? That means just like your hand can just imagine you raise your hand up, and the moment you do, imagine. Now that when I say imagine, that means the subjective realm can visualize a beam of light just pointing from your hand that's pointing to the ceiling. You know, so if I told you to point to the ceiling, now imagine a beam of light. Now that subjective beam of light, it's in your personal realm. When you can get comfortable in acknowledging what is your personal phenomenology of reality and implications and extractions of meaning, and what is the objective realm, and when you can observe both, then you navigate in, I consider, the pure lands of knowledge. So anyways, guys, I wanted to thank you all for listening. And the species is, I find, reaching a very cool point where we gotta share our inner realms and kind of comprehend their patterns, you know? We gotta find the perfect yin yang balance between the inner and outer life, you know? So anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. Much blessings and namaste.